It is fun to speculate, and I had a chance to take a break from the podcast for just a moment, and, family things going on, and it just, being, and I always say this, but being a believer that everything happens for a reason, taking a break from this part of the podcast to get into the second half, and being reminded of what's important in priorities, and so many of us have been so invested in these films and want to know everything that's going to happen that, I hope it doesn't ruin it. It's fun to speculate, but again, I think it all rolls back to that desire to recapture those feelings that we had when we were kids and being a part of something again. A good friend of mine, S.E. Cup, wrote an article today in townhall.com, and she's not a Star Wars fan. I had her on the show last week. I have her on once a week, and I had her on the show last week, and I was trying to convince her to go and watch the movies. I'm saying, look, I know you. I'm a friend of yours. There's a mythology to this that I think you would really, really enjoy if you would allow yourself the opportunity to go and watch this. And she wrote an article today just talking about how she's surrounded by it and just doesn't understand it and doesn't get into it. And that's perfectly fine. It's not everybody's cup of tea. And obviously she's in a minority based off of how popular these movies are. But, they're popular because they do connect with us. And they do tell timeless tales. It goes back to the mythology of what George Lucas did in those original movies. And the prequels got away from that. They didn't relate to us on a human level. Again, I like the prequels, but they didn't. The original movies did. I remember an interview that George Lucas, that Harrison Ford had talking about the movies, and he says the movies are the movies are about mamas and papas. He said, sons and daughters to a certain extent, right? And that's what, getting back to this new movie, that's what they've done here. I like the fact that, and let me put a bow on my other point when it comes to Rey. We'll find out who Rey is. We'll find out who her parents are. And I think sometimes we maybe think too much about it. Maybe we put too much emphasis on trying to find out. I need to know who she's related to. But if anything, this first movie in The Force Awakens has shown us to trust the filmmakers in that they are going to give us a great story. Trust in them that they are going to take us to the place where we need to go, and so far they've done that. And they've brought back that relatability factor in Kylo Ren being Han and Leia's son. I loved Kylo Ren. I loved the fact that he's conflicted. I heard somebody complaining that they didn't like him being, being challenged light side, dark side. And I think that's Snoke's intention. I think Snoke is trying to balance him. I think he wants him on the dark side, but he wants that light side picking at him because it makes him more lethal and it makes him more powerful. I like the fact that early in the film that they reveal through Snoke that Kylo is Han and Leia's son. Now, there is also, at least for me, and you want to talk about the relatability factor of this, and my dad listens to my podcast, and so, Dad, forgive me for telling people our history. But I know my dad well enough to know he's not going to care, and he's already thought this, I know. He's actually watching the movie right now while I'm doing the podcast, and it's going to be very, very interesting to talk to him based off of what I'm about to tell you. But the story of Han and Leia and Kylo Ren is a very real-world story. How many times have we seen... Now, I mean, obviously not Kylo not turning to the dark side, but for the sake of our family, my parents were divorced when I was very young, 10, 11 years old, after being married for 19 years. A part of the reason for their divorce was that I have two older brothers. One of them is blood relation, and the other brother was adopted. My mom wasn't aware or didn't think that she could have kids, so they adopted my older brother, Joey, and then she became pregnant with Jim, and then I came along, shortly afterwards. And Joey has been an issue in our family for years, and a big reason and strain on my parents' marriage, and was not a whole part, but was a part of the reason why they, after 19 years, they got divorced. And he has continued to be a strain on both of my parents because of the paths that he has chosen and their attempts to still reach out to him because he is their son. And watching this movie, I was going, oh, wow. These are real world scenarios. These are things that happen. Marriages and relationships get divided because kids and children go astray, and parents feel responsible for that, but they also feel like they can bring those kids back to the brink. Obviously, for Han Solo, it did not go well. And that serves the story. That was something that everybody knows was supposed to happen in Return of the Jedi, and Lucas said no. We need to have a motivating factor. These movies, when you just talk about them from a storytelling standpoint, have to move forward. And, these characters, it's time for them to move on. And now there's motivation here. Now Han has been killed. Now Kylo, after battling Rey, which we'll talk about here in a moment, has basically given into the dark side. He's killed his father, for crying out loud. Snoke is going to use this as motivation to turn him. Kylo is going to want to seek out Rey to finish that lightsaber battle because he's probably going to assume that he was too wounded to win it. This is all setting up for these next movies coming up. But again, getting back to the storytelling aspect of it, these are human stories. These are stories and things that are relatable in some way, shape, or form. And this particular movie, when it comes to my family, is more relatable than I really kind of imagined. And again, I'm really looking forward to talking to my dad to see what his reaction is going to be, because I'm going to venture a guess it's going to be pretty emotional. I know it was for me watching it. All right, Starkiller Base. I thought Starkiller Base was cool. I would have liked to see more from Starkiller Base. I really hope they put an extended director's cut out. J.J. Abrams said that the original cut was about 2 hours and 40 minutes. I want to see that version. I want to see the version that has all the scenes that were cut that were relating to the toys that were released. I want all of that. I know why they didn't, and I think the movie works without all the... Well, it doesn't think. I know. The movie works without all those scenes. And it is filled with a lot of quick cuts, the movie is. But again, it is very much in the same vein of the original Star Wars movie. If you go back and watch A New Hope, it really does... It really does move quickly, and the cuts are all very much the same. They designed this movie this way for a reason. And, the other thing that I didn't mention when I talked about my first screening of it, and it was even more aware of it the second time around, was I would be hard-pressed to be able, or to be convinced, if I didn't know that The Force Awakens was a J.J. Abrams movie, just watching it, I would not be aware that it was a J.J. Abrams movie. Usually you can pick up on a J.J. Abrams movie. You watch Super 8, Mission Impossible 3, either of the Star Trek movies, they all have a very J.J. Abrams feel. He didn't do that with this movie. Certain shots do. In terms of the quality, it certainly is J.J. Abrams, but it feels like a Star Wars movie. I mean, you could park it right next to those original trilogy movies, and apart from the special effects, in terms of pacing, in terms of shot choices, it feels like a Star Wars movie, and I thought that was really cool. But it also was one of those things that surprised me, because that wasn't what I was expecting going into it in that first viewing. When I went to go see that first viewing, I was expecting a Star Wars version of Star Trek Into Darkness, in terms of the way that scenes were shot, in terms of lens flare. We didn't end up getting any of that. You do get a lot of, I think the J.J. Abrams-like scenes show up in the action sequences. And I love the X-Wing battles. I do think, not necessarily a criticism, but I will say, I wish that they had backed off of the kinetic energy of some of the X-Wing battles, because I would have liked to have seen them slow down a little bit to take in some more of the action. But I say that, and then I go, well, you know what? If I want that, I can go back and watch Return of the Jedi, the end battle, or I can watch the end battle of the Death Star in A New Hope. And I liked the way that they resolved it. And the other thing I would have liked to have seen them done is maybe just disabled Starkiller Base instead of blowing the whole thing up. But I think it serves the story well and where we're heading that they did. Because if they didn't blow up Starkiller Base, then it would have still been there in the next one, in which case you're looking at the same threat again. And how do you unless you go and destroy it again, how do you battle? It just doesn't serve the story very well. Before we get to the end of the movie, and especially the Kylo Ren and Rey lightsaber battle, I just want to talk Snoke for a minute. It's hard to really have an opinion on Snoke because we've only seen him as a CG character in a hologram. So, based off of the way that how good Maz Kanata looks, I have to believe that Snoke, once we see him in regular form, and he's supposed to be, 7 feet tall, that it will look much different. I think that the mystery around Snoke is there for a reason, and I don't think that we are really truly aware of what that character is going to be. Because, look, you could do anything with him at this point. He doesn't even have to be that holographic figure that they showed. He doesn't have to be 7 feet tall. He could be a little guy. He could be Wizard of Oz. You could have somebody else behind the scenes projecting that holographic image of him, and it may not be him. Now, I don't think that's the case based off of the comments that were said at the end of the movie, because he tells Hux to bring Kylo to him after the Rey lightsaber battle because he wants to complete his training. And so the assumption there is, you don't do the Wizard of Oz trick on two guys if you're just going to go and show him that you're somebody else when you bring him to him, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's really hard to kind of pin down an opinion on Snoke. I like what he said. I like what he brought to it. I like him being a threat, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of his backstory. All right. Favorite part of the movie, apart from the Falcon chase, easily, hands down, the lightsaber battle. The battle between Kylo Ren and Finn was great. They established early on that Finn had some skills. He was going to get his butt kicked by that stormtrooper if it wasn't for Han Solo shooting him. So it wasn't like he picked up the saber and was instantly an expert at it. He wasn't. He was throwing that thing around with the minimal training that he had as a stormtrooper, the same way that you and I would. And he almost got his butt kicked by a stormtrooper because of it. So when he goes up against Kylo, he's only able to hold his own for a little bit. And Kylo's wounded. And I thought it was cool the way that Kylo Ren kept banging against that blaster hit that he took in his side to try to numb the pain or to draw energy from it. I thought that was pretty twisted and cool. And then we get to the Rey moment, and her pulling the lightsaber from the snow, again reminiscent of what Luke Skywalker did when he finally used the Force apart from the trench run. But when he finally used the Force to move something in The Empire Strikes Back, she grabs it, and then it's game on. That lightsaber battle was awesome. And the moment when they end up deadlocked and she's over that chasm, and he says to her, you need a teacher. Join me and I'll show you the ways of the dark side of the Force. And then it dawns on her after using that Jedi mind trick on that stormtrooper, which, by the way, was Daniel Craig, if you didn't know. And then you see, just that moment was done perfectly. When she accepts the fact that she can use the Force, she draws on the Force, and then just gives it to Kylo. And she sold it. Rey was just perfect casting for this role. She absolutely sells it and has this great sense of aggression. And there was a moment there at the end where you could see how powerful she felt she was. It reminded me of Luke standing over Vader right before he realizes he's about to cross over the dark side after he chops off Vader's hand, and he's kind of like he feels all this power. And I felt that with Rey, and I love the choice to keep Kylo alive. I like the choice they're keeping all the bad guys alive, but I like the choice that they're keeping Kylo alive and the way that they put that bridge between the two of them that knows that they're going to go and meet up again at some point in the future. And I also think that